The Very Serious Crafts podcast is on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/seriouscrafts to support our podcast, find out about our Patreon half-stitched episodes, and more.
Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 4 of the Very Serious Crafts podcast. I am Molly from Wild Olive.
And I'm Haley from Red Handled Scissors and the Bones and Bobbins podcast. Today we'll be talking about thread painting.
Yes, also sometimes called needle painting. Both
Yes.
are similar. And, oh, shoot, I just remembered a funny thing I was going to tell you in our last episode, and now it's not relevant. I'll have to tell you later.
Oh, what? Tell me anyway.
Well,
Oh.
Tell you, the mind. Anyway, last time we were talking about things we would never make. And one of those things that I said was a leather purse. And literally in anticipation of recording that episode, I had a dream where I was in like a store that sold leather craft items, and I ended up like roaming around and then like starting to like sit down and like teach kids some project or something. It was all very,
That sounds accurate.
Yeah. And I thought I was going to tell you about that, and clearly it went away, and now it came back again.
Well, it has resurfaced. So I'm pleased about that.
Has
And
nothing to do with
presumably if you're
thread or needle painting. Yeah.
well, difficult sewing.
Sure, we can go with
know.
that.
But presumably, if you are listening to this, you have probably listened to the episode we're talking about. So
Yes.
you know what's going on. And if not, go listen to Season 4, Episode 3.
Yes, that.
Yes. And so before we jump into talking, we want to give a shout out to our very serious friends of the Very Serious Crafts podcast who are supporting us at patreon.com/seriouscrafts. Many thanks to Christine and Christina. You're the best.
Thank you so much.
Also, my middle name is Christine.
So there you go.
And my first name was in the last round, so
Yeah, we've had like clusters of similar names joining us
Yep.
on Patreon, and it has worked out nicely for these shout outs, I have to say.
It's true. I love it. Thanks. You guys are making it real easy. Keep it up.
Yeah, it's very nice and tidy.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about some thread painting here.
I'm just so impressed all the time. It's like my favorite corner of Instagram, the thread painting corner, and like especially hand embroidered thread painting.
Yes.
Like it blows my mind every time. And I mean, I'm skilled, but in a very different way.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, we should maybe explain what thread painting is, in case people don't know.
This is a form of embroidery that I always immediately think of hand embroidery for this, but in fact, you can do this with
Me too.
machine embroidery, and I think you had mentioned that even free motion quilting can fall into this category at times, but basically it really is. It looks like a painting that has been made with thread, and the stitches become like brush strokes, and you have this blend of colors that just like, I think sometimes in my head I think that variegated embroidery floss should create this blend of colors that it does not do. Variegated thread is not like self-striping yarn that creates an outcome that is exactly like what you want. The only way that you can do this with embroidery is to literally be changing colors and layering in color.
And there's a business idea.
There you go. I know. That could be pretty cool. But the problem is, of course, it's not like you don't embroider things the same way like you do a sock, where it's always going to be roughly the same size, So, yeah. But Thread painting, it's just changing out those colors and layering in stitches to create what looks like a painting. Blending tones and so on.
Yeah. The way I first saw this thread painting technique was on pet portraits.
Yes.
And like specifically cat portraits. And I think, and I'm not entirely sure because I could not track down some of the earlier stuff that I saw, but I think it was a Japanese trend or possibly a Russian trend.
Okay.
They seem to have existed in that kind of fine detail very near in time to each other.
Okay.
But I think that the first time that I saw someone who I recognized, like from names being on the internet, it was Sarah Barnes, who is Brown Paper Bag on the internet, and she does Brown Paper Bag Stitch, which is basically custom pet portraits. And she did cat portraits on the collar of a button-down shirt, like on either side at the points of the collar.
Yes.
And I feel deeply obsessed. And
yeah, it's
so fun, and they look so real.
Yeah, and I think actually that's one of the things that I love about it is that it does look so real, and yet there's also things where people use it in ways that it's not like trying to create photorealism. It feels more like they are painting something that is just like a slightly stylized oil painting, almost.
Like a style.
Yeah. That. I saw one, and I just, I was wanting to show someone an example of what that is. And so I just pulled up, like, I searched for needle, like the hashtag for thread painting or needle painting on Instagram. And one of the pieces that I saw it was a portrait of a woman's face from, I think, the front and the side. And it used long stitches that looked almost like cross-hatching, but in shades of skin tones. And it really did look like it had been done as a fine art piece. And in fact, it is a fine art piece. I would say if you're needle painting or thread painting can get into fine art status.
Yeah, I think that it is definitely in the area where craft and art overlap. And there's a lot of that area. And I could go off on a tangent on how women do that all the time, but if a man shows up in an area, it's suddenly art. Where if a woman was doing the same thing, it's crafting. I'm not mad about that at all. But
but no, like
this is definitely
this is
art.
at the and it is the looks like it could hang in a museum kind of art in some cases, and not always. Like there's an embroidery artist, her name is Trish Burr, and we definitely are going to link to a bunch of these artists and pieces that we talk about in the show notes. But she has mini courses that you can take. She even has free downloadable, PDF tutorials for the processes for doing things, and a lot doing thread painting. And a lot of her stuff is more botanical in nature, lots of florals and things, but not all. And
yeah, I was just going to talk about some of that stuff too.
Yeah, and I think that her site is a really great place to start. And then also Amina from Stitch Floral, She her
Oh,
blog,
yeah.
she does so many beautiful florals, and I think that she actually learned some of the technique that she uses from Trish Burr, but she has a whole section on with tips for doing this technique. And I like that there's an element of accessibility to it. If you've done some embroidery, you can learn to do this and just start,
Yeah.
visualizing the colors blending together. But like there's also a point of needing an understanding of art to get to some of these other like upper levels of things
Oh, yeah.
that that's not where I am, at least at this point.
I I've never tried this, although when we were talking about things that look like they could or should hang in a museum, it made me think immediately about the Museum of Natural History here in New York City.
Yeah.
And, like, if people have not been to or seen that museum, it is a very, very old school museum with, like, dioramas.
Yes.
Like, life-size dioramas set up and not tacky. Well, sometimes tacky. But,
in a charming sort of way.
It's like... Yeah, it's an old museum, and it has, like, specimen cases and
Yes.
things like that. And so a lot of this work, especially my favorite pieces, are botanical illustrations that I could absolutely imagine hanging out in the Museum of Natural History.
Yeah.
And I love that look. I actually have a botanical illustration slightly behind me. And like that is a technique that I have all the supplies and books to learn how to do and have not yet done it. But I just doing that in like a medium that I would say that I am an expert cross-stitcher, even though most of the patterns you would see me design are beginner accessible.
Right.
I know how to do photorealistic and art cross-stitch.
Yeah.
But I do not have these skills, and I am just in awe.
Yeah. I have always, when people ask me why I like doing embroidery, I've always said, well, it's like drawing with thread. Because
yeah,
that is what it is. Or, even in some cases, it's a little bit more like doing a coloring book with thread. But this is just, and this is more of that, but just to the next level. And like so often, especially when you see like the animal portraits, you see that it's being worked with a single strand of embroidery floss, which means that
yes.
And because that's how you're getting the blending of colors, and yet that means the coverage is gonna be much less. It's going to take many, many, many more stitches.
Oh, yeah.
And that just blows my mind.
Yeah, I think some more of my favorites in this area are, you've seen like the really realistic like flowers and butterflies on tulle, right?
I think so, yeah.
Well, and I will post photos of someone doing that, but like
I've just clicked
like
on
dandelion seeds. And,
I'm looking at this right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so there are some really, really beautiful and unexpected things that you can do on different fabrics than you would generally use.
That's a good point. I wouldn't have thought of that.
I have to say, yeah. And so many people, because there's so much structure in those pieces because of the layering of the thread. You can use delicate fabrics that you wouldn't necessarily be able to use on something less substantial.
Which I think is almost the opposite of what you would think or expect.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. There is a woman named Megan Sanowski.
Okay.
Who does fantastic, like, water images involving water often. And there are 2 of her pieces that I am obsessed with. I guess 3 technically, because there are 2 of them in one photo. One of them is a goldfish in a bag, where she has actually created the depth of something clear, which is fascinating. And then there are otters.
Okay, so I'm on her Instagram right now, and the otters, I've not seen the goldfish yet, but I saw the otters, and wow, they're absolutely delightful. I also really liked her bowl of cereal, where it looks like the Fruit Loops are sort of splashing out with the milk, and in which she said, the stitching is really sloppy in this, but I'm posting it anyway. And it's just magnificent. And she actually came back and edited the post to say, oh, thanks for your kind words. I guess I was being overly critical. She was definitely being overly critical, because her work is wow.
And there's so much movement in it.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a kingfisher. There are birds, like birds interacting with water. And like, there's a lot of water in her work and a lot of movement in it that, like, splashes and things like that. And her work is also not done on white, generally speaking. I mean, I assume sometimes it is, but it's really cool. And I did just post a link under her name to the goldfish.
Okay,
if you would like to see it.
I'm going for it.
I will post it.
I was scrolling through too and seeing that she has also done some really cool, more impressionistic pieces where she's working with many bright colors, and she's not going for something realistic, but the level of detail and how she has how she's capturing features, like there's a like a leopard or a cheetah, and it's got pinks and purples and blues and oranges, and it's so beautiful. But again, what you see, and in this one you can tell she has a close-up where she's using more strands, but it's because she's going for that impressionistic painting look with these broader strokes.
Right.
And
like palette painting.
Yeah. The ability to do so many different things with this is astounding to me. And also the goldfish is so cool.
Yeah. Ooh, and she also, like, you should just scroll through all of her work because it's just really delightful to look at.
Yeah.
But she posted the back of one of them. And those of you who have listened for a long time know that my backs are as neat as my fronts.
Uh-huh.
And hers are not.
Well,
and I feel like that is such a good thing for people to see. No, it wouldn't be possible.
Right, because like the function of this is gonna how you would do it would be very different. But yeah, you're right. I've just found that piece, and wow.
Yeah. And it really wouldn't be possible. Like, I'm not saying that in judgment.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I feel like that makes it feel less intimidating.
Yeah.
If you see the back and see all of the movement that goes into it really shows on the back.
Right. Can you imagine if you were trying to do a piece like this with so many stitches where you're trying to blend things and just make it work because there's a certain amount of it that you just have to figure out as you go. You know, there's not a prescribed way to do this. If you were trying to do that and keep the back neat, you would spend as much time managing your thread as you would actually accomplishing anything, because it just wouldn't, you would have to focus on that so much. And this is clearly, she's just stitching, and I think that's beautiful. Another one, like a tutorial that I love because it's very different from this, like the hyper realistic stuff, is Anne from Lolly and Grace she actually has a number of posts on this kind of technique, but she does it in a very bold, colorful sort of way that again looks closer to that cheetah or whatever, where she's bringing
it's
in
almost
blocks
like
of colors.
stamping.
Yeah, and she like does the color and then she outlines it in black so that it looks again more coloring book like. She also has done she has some mushrooms that are very like lighthearted in how they are presented. They're not, again, hyper realistic, but they really get the blending thing going on. And again, I think
they're really cool.
It's a good, like, you can do this version of this technique.
I mean, hers look like someone who's really, really great at marker technique, which is really hard to be great at.
And I think it's so cool to me that something like this does look a lot of different ways. It's not all one thing, because I tend to think of it as gorgeous pet portraits, or even some landscapes that that people do.
Would you like to have your mind blown?
Sure. What am I looking at?
Click on the Emily Ferris link.
Okay.
So Emily Ferris is a UK embroiderer, and she does whimsical, hyper-realistic things.
Yes.
And I am obsessed with two things that she has made, and I will repost them literally anytime they come up. And it is her Luna moth. And there's a giant red mushroom. And I can't. They're amazing. And she designs kits. And so you can buy the patterns. And she also has like a set of classes on, and I don't know this platform, Domestika.
Okay,
and so like video tutorial classes. And like her work is, I think, my absolute favorite of this type of work.
Yeah.
Probably because it's the most to my personal aesthetic.
Well, I think that it's a really unique blend of realism and whimsy. It's like, she's doing
Look at how fuzzy the butterfly body is.
Yeah. There's a bumblebee one that she has. It's on like a night sky with these flowers underneath it. If you actually look at it, the sky all around the bee and everything is all stitched as well. It's not just what you see in the foreground. But she's taking a very serious craft and also not taking it too seriously. Like, she puts these playful elements in there that are so charming. I also really appreciate that she has a number of times where she shows, here's what this looked like. I'm looking at a moth design that she did. Here's what my embroidery looked like in 2013. Here's what it looks like in 2018. And seeing where she came from, where she is.
I forgot. She's really good about that kind of encouragement.
Yeah. You could literally just look at these pictures all day.
I probably will. Because why finish this book proposal that I'm working on if I could just stare at whimsical bees?
Precisely. I'm also quite smitten by the blue butterfly surrounded by florals.
Yes. I just love... I feel like the ones... This is why we are so perfect together, is the ones that I am obsessed with are the exact opposite of the ones that you are obsessed with. And I love that. Because, like, she's so skilled, and she's so skilled at working in different color palettes that there are massive differences within her art, even if they're the same technique. Yeah. And it's very cool.
I have to ask.
I'm deeply impressed.
Definitely. Definitely. I have to ask, on the toadstool embroidery, is your favorite version the one on the light background or the dark background?
Dark, definitely.
Yes. I 100% agree with you there. It's magical.
Yeah, it's just one of those, that's it. I mean, it's beautiful on the light background, but the dark background just really makes those colors pop.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, generally speaking, I will like the things on the dark background instead of the lighter backgrounds, but some of it is perfect. I mean, frankly, I think it's all perfect. But yeah, I love her art. I love her technique, and I want to be friends with her. To be clear, I do not know this person. I just am a huge fan of her work. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. So I have now clicked on the last link that you included in our little planning and show notes document. This is, what is her name? Katie Martin. And this is
Harvest
like
Goods.
This is almost like now for something completely different, because it's a little bit more open and different feeling that feels almost more like a small watercolor sketch in thread. Yeah. In a lot of, at least for a lot of them. And again,
it's not beautiful. Dissimilar to any of the others. It has, I think, more visible contrast. Mm-hmm.
And also, she has some pieces.
And a lot of texture.
Lots of texture, yes. It reminds me of, and now I cannot remember for the life of me who it is. Someone I follow she does embroidered bridal bouquet pieces. So you send her a photo of your bridal bouquet, and then she stitches it up. And let me tell you, she captures those things so well. I think she also does some pet portraits, but
that's neat. That's a really nice keepsake.
It is. It's a cool way to capture that. And again, there was one that she posted a picture of it, and she did it side by side, like half photo, half embroidery, and you pretty much couldn't tell where one started and one stopped. She does such a good job of doing that, and
that blows my mind.
Yeah, I'll figure out who it is, and I will make sure that I add that to the show notes as well, because you just have to see her. Cool. You just have to see her work, and it's all.
Yeah, I mean, these are just such talented and just such inspiring makers, and I love that even though we've been in the business for a really long time, there are still things that stop us like dead in our tracks.
Yes.
I think that the Harvest Goods company that we're looking at right now, it reminds me of crewel embroidery.
Yeah.
But in floss instead of wools.
Exactly. In fact,
definitely.
I had a conversation about this with my mom because she had never really heard of it, and she immediately went towards crewel as I was describing it to her. And that is, I think, especially when you see pieces that are made with more strands of embroidery floss where you get thicker lines, it feels like crewel, which makes sense because crewel wool is going to be thicker.
Yep. So, and there's just more texture because you can see the strands.
Yeah. Well, and that's, it's kind of like, I've seen pieces where it looks like waves crashing up, and like using French knots to create the foam of a wave.
I love a French knot detail.
Yeah. And it just like the texture that you can get from embroidery, again, it's similar to palette knife painting because you want to touch it, and you really shouldn't be touching that embroidery and getting your oily hands on there, but it's so delightful.
I mean, wash your hands first.
Yeah.
But
ooh. Mm-hmm,
yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm amazed, and also I feel like it should be mentioned, because we've been talking about painting so much during this, that oftentimes the artists are also basically watercolor painting the backgrounds of some of these before stitching.
Yes, and giving it essentially like a paint by number
lovely
type of a thing, but just something for them to work from, to, like sketching in a design first, which is another thing I've seen where people, do a little sketch of what they're planning, but a lot of times, again, they just freehand sketch it because they're that kind of an artist as well. Or sometimes there's plenty of patterns that you can find that give you that framework to start with so that you can just fill in the color and have success with it.
Yeah, and I think that that this person, Katie Martin, also seems to have kits, it looks like, that like some smaller, very accessible starting points.
Yeah.
So, should you suddenly find yourself deeply enamored, go forth and stitch.
That's right. And spoiler alert, it's likely that you will become enamored.
Yeah, very likely.
Yeah. Indeed. Well, this was a very lovely topic to explore, and and I hope that as you're listening to this and you're listening to us like talk about something that is very visual, I hope that you can imagine some of these things with us, but really go look at these show notes so that you can see just the level of expertise and possibility that is here.
Yeah, because it'll blow your mind.
Yeah. All right. Now I'm going to go try not to start a new project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the problem.
Always.
With, especially these.
Yeah.
Boy, do I want to stitch.
Yeah,
not when I'm supposed to be stitching.
Right. I have all of the supplies.
Me too.
Mm-hmm. In fact, most crafters that have done any sort of needlecraft at all probably have all the supplies.
That is true.
It's dangerous.
I didn't think about that. Mm-hmm. Even more accessible.
Yeah.
All right. Before we actually talk ourselves into starting these, I think we should probably sign off.
Indeed. It's time.
Yes. So thanks for listening to the Very Serious Crafts podcast. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Serious Crafts, and on Facebook at Very Serious Crafts. You can also find show notes, which you definitely want to look at.
Yes.
And all things Very Serious Crafts at veryseriouscrafts.com. And if you happen to be one of the designers who we got really, really excited about and you want to be friends, let us know.
Yes, please.
Because we want to be friends.
Yeah.
And finally, if you're a fan of the Very Serious Crafts podcast, please leave us a 5-star review on whichever platform you use to listen to podcasts. Good ratings help us show up in recommendations, which helps more people who love crafting find us.
The end.
Ta-da!